Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to a complete Mualani guide. Mualani is the first Natlan 5-star character, a 5-star Hydro Catalyst main DPS, and in today's video, we're going to cover everything you need to know about Mualani. I'm going to cover her best builds, teams, playstyle, artifacts, weapons, constellations, and just everything you need to know on top of a C0 showcase to help you guys build her and play her efficiently. Everything you need in one video. Before we begin though, I want you guys to know that I did play Mualani quite a bit before she came out and got a lot of footage from the creator experience server, which I'm very grateful to have access to, but obviously keep in mind that some of that stuff isn't final, and I also got a lot of footage from the Abyss in the live server on my main account, so that's primarily what you'll be seeing combat wise. And lastly, as always, I want you guys to know that I do stream most nights on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested. And with that being said, let's talk about Mualani. Alright, so starting things off, what does Mualani actually do? Firstly, it's worth noting that Mualani as a catalyst user will deal hydro damage on every normal attack, which isn't relevant for most of her damage as you're not typically using her normals, but it's nice to know in case you want to apply more hydro to help, for example, swirl hydro or anything else you're trying to do. With that in mind, the main part of her kit is definitely her elemental skill, Surf Shark Wavebreaker. When you use this ability, Mualani will start riding her shark and will be surfing anywhere, anytime. She can move across water and lava, but you can also just use it in normal places and you'll start surfing. When you use your skill, Mualani will enter the Night Soul's blessing state and gain 60 Night Soul points. Now, while I briefly touched on this in my last video, what you need to know about Night Soul is just that it's a new mechanic for Natlan characters, similar to Numa and Usia in Fontaine, with what it exactly does varying from character to character, but synergizing with certain passives and artifact sets like the Obsidian Codex, which we'll talk about later. Now, this Night Soul blessing state will effectively be her skill. This is where you will gain a second stamina bar, you'll start surfing, and the stamina bar will continuously deplete over time and deplete faster when you do basically any action like move around, dash around, or do attacks. To make this simpler, it kind of works similarly to Wanderer's skill, basically giving you another stamina bar that represents your Night Soul's blessing. Now, inside this Night Soul state, obviously you'll surf around, move faster, and gain interruption resistance. Additionally, your normal attacks will be switched to Night Soul aligned hydro damage, scaling with your Mualani's max HP. This will effectively just be a shark bite that you can also use mid-air. What's important to know about this ability, however, is that you can stack it by dashing through enemies, and it does get significantly stronger. In fact, anytime you swim through an enemy, they will get marked and you will get one stack. You can get multiple stacks from the same enemy, by the way, by swimming through them multiple times, or you can get stacks from different enemies by swimming through multiple enemies, meaning that you can stack it both in single target and in AoE. Although it will stack faster against multiple enemies, as you won't have to constantly swim through one enemy, but you can swim through a bunch instead. When your Mualani has the maximum of 3 stacks, you will not only deal way more damage, you'll get a wave momentum damage bonus, but you will also gain a huge amount of AoE damage. In fact, when Mualani has 3 stacks, she will use an attack called Sharky Surging Bite, which will be a really strong hit of hydro damage, which will have the highest scaling, hitting an opponent and then also firing shark missiles at up to 5 nearby marked opponents, dealing just a little bit less damage than the main hit. Now, when I say big scaling, I really mean it. This ability starts with an okay amount of HP scaling, but will get way more once you stack it and do a fully stacked bite. Additionally, this hit's AoE will be missiles that fire to every enemy you marked, up to 5, and so even if your main bite wouldn't hit an enemy that's maybe a bit far away, well, they'll still get hit provided they're marked. The damage dealt you do is a bit lower based on how many enemies you tagged, up to 3, with the maximum decrease only being 28%, so it'll still be a big chunk of damage, making her great at AoE, on top of also being able to stack faster against multiple enemies. And this is because you can only gain up to 1 stack from the same opponent every 0.7 seconds, so naturally, swimming through a lot of enemies can let you stack up instantly, whereas against one enemy, it'll still be fine, but it'll take longer to stack up, as you'll have to wait for this stack cooldown. It's worth noting though that you can only do a hit every 1.8 seconds, regardless of how fast you're stacking, but stacking against one enemy will typically take longer, whereas against many enemies, obviously you're like instantly stacking, and you'll be able to hit every 1.8 seconds. After Mualani's bite, all stacks will be removed, so you'll have to remark the enemies again to do your next attack. Typically, you can expect a varying amount of bites, usually 3 to 4, depending on how many enemies you're fighting, getting less in single target and more in AoE. You swim through enemies, use a bite, and keep going until your skill duration ends by running out of Night Soul points. Additionally, something I wanted to mention about your skill is that up to 2 times when you hit an opponent with your Sharky Surging Bite, so your fully stacked bite, a puffer will be generated that will swim to you and give you 20 Night Soul points when you pick it up. These things are very easy to get. As I said, they swim towards you, so you can just kind of run into them or passively get it, and you will gain more Night Soul points, effectively making your skill last longer. Also, keep in mind that all of the bites you're doing inside of Mualani's skill are considered normal attack damage, so any buffs to your normal attacks or anything like that will be factored in to the damage you're doing inside of your skill, as once again, they are considered to be normal attacks. Moving on, for Mualani's elemental burst, it is just a pretty straightforward big hit of AoE hydro damage. It scales on your HP, has a 15-second cooldown with a 60 energy cost, and Mualani will basically fire a shark missile that will track enemies, explode, and do a solid amount of damage. It's not the main part of your kit. It's okay if you have to burst every other rotation, because it can actually be a bit difficult to get enough energy to always use this burst, but more on that later. But overall, it's just a nice bonus hit of damage. Additionally, how much damage your burst does actually increases based on how many Night Soul bursts you have in your team, effectively how many Natlan characters you're running with Mualani. Obviously, there's not that many now, but we'll be getting more, increasing the damage of your Storm Burst shot by 15, 30, or 45% of Mualani's max HP based on the number of stacks you have, with Mualani gaining 1 stack anytime a nearby party member triggers a Night Soul burst, having up to 3 stacks max and lasting 20 seconds, increasing your burst damage by 15 to 45% of your Mualani's max HP. And lastly, for Mualani's talent priority, be sure to maximize her skill and then her burst, and you can ignore her normal attacks as you're not typically using them. Alright, now with that said, how do you actually play Mualani? Well, her playstyle is relatively straightforward. You use all your support characters' abilities, set up whatever you need to do, and then swap your Mualani, start riding a shark, swim through enemies, and when you get 3 stacks, you unleash a big shark bite that deals a ton of damage and has a great AoE, hitting every enemy that you marked. Because Mualani attacks relatively slowly and hits for very big numbers, it's very clear that she's a character designed around the vaporize reaction, so you want to be vaping every single hit that you do, every shark bite, to try to really amplify and maximize your damage. She's a character who also gets significantly better in AoE, as instead of having to just kind of wait and swim through one enemy, you can swim through multiple, stacking up way faster, and then also effectively dealing more damage, because instead of just having one big hit, you can get like 5, which is one of her biggest strengths in my opinion. Now, even in single target, however, she can still be fine. Her damage is genuinely pretty good. She does really big numbers, satisfies your damage for screenshot craving, and is a character who will only get better as future Natlan characters are released. Now, for more information on my thoughts about this, I went in depth in my last video, my initial Mualani review, so go watch that if you want more information. But as a summary, it is clear that we are lacking certain supports that synergize really well with not just forward vape, but also synergy with Natlan characters, in the sense that I think Natlan characters are designed to work with one another. Mualani has a passive where her burst will deal more damage with other Natlan characters who have Night Soul bursts. There's the new hero set that gives you up to 40% elemental damage bonus, which is insane, by the way, if the equipping character is from Natlan or has a Night Soul burst. And it is very clear that future characters such as maybe the Pyro Archon or just someone else who has good synergy with Mualani will help make her teams a lot better and make her feel even stronger. Now, with that said, even as of right now, she's great, genuinely a solid DPS that I have been enjoying and that I can recommend if you want a DPS character, but not someone who is game breaking. I don't think she will define the meta, at least right now, but if you want a new DPS and find her fun or appealing, then she is definitely a good option that you can choose. Additionally, as mentioned, I believe she will only get better as time passes, as new characters, new supports who synergize with her and her kit are released throughout Natlan's duration, which I think will greatly help her get better and stronger teams. It is important to highlight, however, that as a hyper carry, Mualani is just that. She represents the vast majority of your team's damage, alongside maybe someone like Emily or Xiangling doing some passive damage, but most of it will be from Mualani, vaporizing her big hits and utilizing all the buffs that you can give her. Lastly, for a bit more rotation information, as mentioned, you want to set up your support characters first, make sure enemies are either affected by pyro or are burning, use all your buffs, off-field abilities, and then swap into Mualani, your main DPS, press your skill, start swimming around, get 3 stacks, and immediately use a normal attack, do a shark bite, and then rinse and repeat as many times as you can. In single target, you can expect 3 shark bites, and in AoE, you can get more. Typically, it's 3 or 4 shark bites. Make sure not to waste your Night Soul stamina. Don't dash around too much. Make sure the puffers are swimming back to you. And also, you will typically use your burst at the end of your rotation, usually every other rotation, because you're not stacking energy recharge, as we'll cover in the next section, or just whenever you have it available. Using her burst at the end of your rotation allows you to not only not waste any of your skill's uptime, because you're not using it inside of your skill, but it also allows you to be fully buffed by the Obsidian Codex set because you just consumed Night Soul points, so your crit rate will be increased by 40%. So that's kind of why you use it at the end. And just make sure you're vaporizing all of your hits, as it really will skyrocket your damage. Lastly, I wanted to mention that sometimes it's also worth doing a not fully stacked shark bite hit. Like, obviously you want to get 3 stacks and do a normal, do your shark bite, which will deal way more damage and have AoE as well. But sometimes you might have to do a half stacked hit right at the end as your bar is ticking down if you don't have enough time to fully stack a hit, which can help get you a bit more damage before your rotation ends and your skill expires. All right, now with all that out of the way, let's now talk about how to actually build your Mualani. First of all, for artifact sets, it's very straightforward. The new artifact set released in 5.0, Obsidian Codex, is absolutely broken and by far her best in slot. What this set actually does is give you a 15% damage bonus on the 2-piece and a 40% crit rate increase on the 4-piece, which which is absolutely insane. Now, the way these buffs work is intertwined with the new Night Soul mechanic, which we covered earlier, making it a Natlan exclusive set, and Mualani is no exception. She has really good uptime on the set. You can just permanently gain these stats and benefit from the insane amount of crit rate you're gaining, even surpassing sets like Marechaussee Hunter as just giving you really so much for free. For those reasons and the consistency of this set's uptime, since you will be using Mualani's skill, you'll consume Night Soul points, and you'll fully get 40 crit rate and 15% damage bonus, makes it the set that you should use on Mualani. Now, with that in mind, it's a new set, might not have it yet, and on release, obviously it won't be possible to just get a perfect set. So while I recommend building your way towards it, good placeholder sets include Unfinished Reverie with Burning, which actually does also give you a lot of stats, mix and matching 2 pieces, or other sets like Heart of Depth. Generally though, just mix and matching whatever you have and choosing based on your substats until you can get the new set. Additionally, I also wanted to mention the Marechaussee Hunter set as being viable if you're running Farina alongside your Mualani, once again, for crit rate and a normal attack damage increase, being good if your HP is constantly changing. Overall though, just go Obsidian Codex. Now moving on for the stats you want on Mualani, this part is also quite straightforward. As an HP scaler, HP percent is great on her, and as a main DPS who does a ton of damage, building for your crit through crit damage and crit rate is essential as well. With that in mind, it's important to understand that Mualani can very easily overcap on crit rate, so you want to be mindful as to exactly how much you're building. This is because she gains crit rate on her Ascension stat, and will also gain, starting with just over 24 crit rate when fully ascended, on top of gaining another 40% for free from the Obsidian Codex set. Because of this, she will already have around 64% crit rate, and so you definitely need to be mindful of this when you are balancing your crit ratio, factor in the extra 40% you're gaining, and being careful not to overcap, especially if you're also running something like a crit rate weapon, but more on that in the next section. For now though, understand that both crit rate, crit damage, and also HP are very important, and Elemental Mastery is also a strong substat, because as we saw, Mualani is a character who will be vaporizing. Generally speaking, vaping her damage is huge. Getting Elemental Mastery will help increase that vaporized damage, and so EM is definitely a useful stat that you can get as well alongside the others. Regarding energy recharge, I don't recommend building it, as while Mualani's burst is nice, it's not the central part of her kit, and so you should typically burst whenever you have it, usually being every other rotation, instead of losing out on offensive stats and focusing on ER. For all those reasons, build your Mualani offensively, and for your main stats, you're typically looking for HP on your sands, hydro damage bonus on your goblet, and crit damage on your circlet. Now with that in mind, if you somehow have a ton of crit damage and need more crit rate, a crit rate circlet is technically viable, but again, you'll probably overcap, so go crit damage. And HP percent can be viable as well if you have a ton of crit through things like your substats and weapon, making an HP circlet viable, but crit damage is typically the best. I do want to specify though that an HP circlet can be your best in slot, notably if you get a ton of crit from something like her signature weapon and are lacking on the HP front. Going for an HP circlet can be competitive and oftentimes actually slightly better than a crit damage circlet with a weapon that gives you a lot of crit, like her signature weapon, notably. And regarding EM, it is a viable sands option as well. HP is more generalistic, but obviously for vaporize, and if you don't have a lot of EM substats, maybe you have a ton of HP and just need more EM, then an EM sands can definitely be a viable and strong option. So you can pick based on your substats, with HP being the general recommendation, but EM not being far behind, generally speaking. Keep in mind though that if you have EM buffers such as sucrose or external sources of EM in your team, then going for an EM sands will be worse. Moving on from Mualani's best weapons, here I'm pleased to announce that there's actually not only an amazing free-to-play option that you can get right now, but also not too much to talk about in the sense that her weapon selection is pretty straightforward. Now starting things off, Surf's Up, her signature weapon, is a really strong stat stick for Mualani. This weapon comes with a low base attack and an astounding 88% crit damage, which already is really good for Mualani. Additionally, through its effect, you will gain 20% HP and a 12% normal attack damage increase for a maximum of 48% normal attack damage bonus, 20% max HP, and also 88% crit damage, making it just an amazing stat stick overall, and definitely your Mualani's best choice. Now, by just how much it's better than the other options is something we'll cover in the weapon ranking, but understand that while it is a really good signature, and one that I can recommend as a good stat stick if you want it, it is by no means a necessary weapon, as Mualani does actually have, as mentioned, a surprisingly strong free-to-play option, and also a surprisingly strong battle pass option. Namely, for your free-to-play option, Ring of Yaxx is a great catalyst that is Fontaine's new craftable weapon that you can apparently purchase from Natlan's blacksmith, craft it, and refine it for free. Now, it may be hard to get this at the start of the region, you're gonna have to level it, farm for it, and all that, but nevertheless, not only is it a free-to-play option, but it's also, I believe, available through the ongoing web event, although I'm not entirely sure how that works. What you need to understand though is that the stats on this weapon are just pretty solid. It gives you an HP percent main stat, which Mualani can obviously make use of, and then will additionally increase your normal attack damage by up to 32% at R5, 16 at R1, after using your elemental skill. You'll get a certain amount of damage depending on your refinement based on your max HP, but because Mualani is stacking so much HP anyways, you can cap this out easily and get the full 32% normal attack damage bonus at R5 on top of over 41% HP, which makes it a solid stat stick. This is one of your best options, surpassing a lot of other 4 stars and even some 5 stars, and because it's free to play, it means that everyone can get a good weapon for Mualani. Now, a weapon that can be better is the Sacrificial Jade, a battle pass weapon under a few conditions. First of all, it's a weapon that gets better with refinement, and second of all, and most importantly, it's a weapon that's especially strong if you aren't overcapping on crit rate by too much. Now, the problem here is that obviously Mualani gets a ton of crit rate through her best in slot artifact set and also from her crit rate ascension. Because of this, if you run a crit rate weapon such as Sacrificial Jade that gives you 36.8 crit rate, an absolutely insane amount, you will already start at 101 crit rate. This means that you're by default going to be maxed out on crit rate and won't be looking for it on any artifact you're building. If that's the case and you can manage to not overcap by too much, not get too many crit rate substats, it'll be an amazing option, and even if you're overcapping by a bit, it's still really strong. It's okay if you have like 110 crit rate, it looks funny, it's a bit of wasted stats, but it'll still be a good weapon. But if you have too much crit rate and you're wasting too many substats, then it won't be better than your free-to-play Ring of Yaxch option, which will then be more recommended. I'll include this in the weapon ranking for more clarity, but the reason why this weapon can be so good is because it gives you a lot of crit rate, and even if you're just using, let's say, 30% of it, it's still a lot, while also giving you a 32 to 64% max HP increase and a 40 to 80 elemental mastery bonus, depending on your refinement level. This is a weapon that is okay stats at R1 and really good at R5 because of the fact that you are vaporizing, so the EM buffs are useful, and the HP percent on it is very valuable for Mualani. Now, keep in mind though that the effect triggers when you're off field for a bit and then gets cancelled if you stay on field for longer than 10 seconds, but because Mualani's damage is very front-loaded in big shark hits and also in a short rotation, you're not typically spending too much time on her. Like, you swap onto her, you press your skill, you swim around, you do a bite, you repeat that for the duration of your skill, and then you burst. These buffs should have a good uptime if you are playing her efficiently. For those reasons, I can definitely recommend this weapon as a great choice, provided you aren't wasting too much crit rate and can modify your artifacts around it. Oh, and also I do want to emphasize that Sac J does get significantly better with refinements, and at R1 it can oftentimes perform worse than even your free-to-play option, so understand that it's fine at R1, but definitely a lot better and more recommendable with refinements. Outside of just those weapons though, there are other options you can use, like notably 5-star stat sticks, namely Tome of the Eternal Flow for HP and a ton of crit damage, 1000 Floating Dreams, Nahida's signature, for a ton of EM and some damage bonus, or basically any 5-star crit stat stick that can work just fine, like any of the HP percent or crit ones, with Tome of the Eternal Flow typically being the best one. Outside of that, you can run other 4-stars like Widsith. Widsith gives you crit damage and a inconsistent and kind of weird effect, but one that can give you a huge amount of stats. Personally, I've always loved Widsith, but keep in mind that one of the 3 buffs you're gaining on Mualani is useless. This is because you can gain attack percent, which she doesn't care about, alongside either elemental damage bonus, which is amazing, or elemental mastery, which is also great. These effects are significantly better at R5, and Widsith can actually be a good stat stick, especially for trying to get like a speed clear, or worst case, resetting if you get the attack buff by noticing one music note over your head. Overall though, it's not the most consistent option, but it's definitely a viable one if you like it and know how to play around it, getting better with refinement, but not being the most recommended choice, especially when you already have such a strong free-to-play weapon that's accessible, and you can keep the Widsith for someone who can make use of all 3 stats, but nevertheless, it can still be good. Lastly, other options you may already have, like Prototype Amber, can be okay and a solid alternative free-to-play choice, but again, the new Ring Catalyst is typically going to be your go-to. Also, the new Event Catalyst gives you HP, so it's a viable stat stick, but it's not quite as good as the new craftable, the Ring of Yaxch, so I don't recommend it as much, but it's fine to use as another free-to-play option. With that in mind, I'll put a weapon ranking on screen now to give you guys a rough idea as to how each weapon performs, but keep in mind that a lot of assumptions go into this, and the exact weapon ranking will vary based on you, your team, your artifacts, your rotation, what you're fighting, and much more. As you can see though, her signature is genuinely a solid weapon, a good choice and a good signature, but she also has a solid battle pass option and a really strong free-to-play one, on top of also being able to utilize 5-star stat sticks, allowing basically everyone to have a good weapon for Mualani. Next up, for Mualani's Constellations, here's what you need to know. Firstly, she's a character who's very solid at C0, but also has a pretty good C1 if you want an early upgrade. Her first Constellation will increase the damage dealt of your first bite inside of your skill, increasing it by 66% of Mualani's max HP, giving it a bigger scaling and just a bigger hit of front-loaded damage. This is great not only for more front-loaded damage and just more damage overall, but also because your first hit is the one that will always be fully buffed, none of your buffs will expire, and having a considerable amount more damage at the start of your rotation is always very nice. This Constellation can represent around a 20 to 25% damage increase and is pretty good for a C1. This Constellation also obviously buffs the shark missiles as well, so it'll increase the damage of your first bite to all the enemies you're hitting, and it also allows you to consume less less Night Soul Blessing points outside of combat, which is convenient for exploration. On a similar note, Mualani's C2 is also quite nice, as you'll get 2 wave momentum stacks, so 2 stacks in your skill immediately as you enter Night Soul's Blessing, and you will also gain another stack when you obtain a puffer. Additionally, if you obtain 2 puffers in a single instance of Night Soul's Blessing, you will recover an additional 12 Night Soul points over 2 seconds, effectively allowing you to stack your bites up faster and also extend the duration of your skill because you'll be recovering Night Soul points. C2 is therefore nice for having a bit more time on your Mualani, letting you get more bites per rotation, on top of helping you stack faster. Next up, Mualani's C3 and C5 increase her talent levels, with C3 increasing her skills talent level, so pretty nice. And then her C4 will both give her 8 energy when she obtains a puffer, and will also increase her burst damage quite significantly. This makes her ult stronger and even more worth using. And lastly, her C6 will effectively just make her C1's buff apply to every single shark bite you do inside of your skill. As you can see, it literally just says that the damage increase is no longer limited to just once every Night Soul Blessing, so you'll get this increase in scaling on every single shark bite that you do, which honestly is a pretty big deal as it makes every single bite nuke for quite a bit more. Overall, Mualani does have solid constellations that not just are pretty good damage increases to her, but also, since she's the vast majority of her team's damage as a hyper carry, any increase to her damage will be a big increase to your team's damage. So again, while you definitely don't need any constellations, please don't feel forced to get any. Mualani does have good personal constellations with solid early stopping points as well, like notably her C1 and her C2 both being quite strong. And lastly, if you're wondering which is a better stopping point between C1 and R1, her signature, they are very similar, so it depends on what weapon you're running, with both of them providing you a similar damage increase to the sort of baseline free-to-play weapon C0 Mualani. With that in mind, I expect both C1 and her signature to be a very popular stopping point for those who choose to main this character. Alright, now with all that out of the way, let's get into one of the most important sections, talk about Mualani's best teams and synergies. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, and in more depth in my first Mualani review, I want to reiterate that Mualani is a character whom I believe will get significantly better team options as future Natlan characters come out, like probably the Pyro Archon and others as well. While she definitely has some strong functioning teams and synergies right now, which I will cover, it's important to understand that, as mentioned, a lot of characters don't have perfect synergy with Mualani, and she is awaiting Natlan characters that synergize with her, given many factors of her kit, and even the new hero set, which is a great Natlan support set. With that in mind, here's how you want to build a Mualani team, starting by giving you guys the general rules, and then giving you some specific synergies and example team comps. Firstly, Mualani is a character who's designed around forward vape. You want to be triggering the vaporized reaction on Mualani because she has slow but big hits of hydro damage that you can vaporize and significantly increase your damage. Because her hydro isn't that fast, your pyro option doesn't actually have to apply pyro all that fast either, provided they can just keep up with Mualani's shark hits. Because of this, your team is naturally going to include a pyro option. Now, in terms of pyro options, there are some good ones, some mediocre ones, and some decent ones, but I do believe that this is going to be the main part of a Mualani team that will get better in the future. This is because every pyro option with Mualani has 1 or 2 weaknesses or problems that prevent them from being particularly amazing with Mualani. Again, I think this is because they're trying to release new pyro characters. Probably the Pyro Archon will come and synergize really well with Mualani, so again, disclaimer on that. But as far as her existing pyro options go, here's what you need to know. Firstly, Xiangling has always been the go-to off-field pyro applier and sub DPS. Xiangling does insane amounts of damage and applies a ton of pyro, but the problem with her in a Mualani team is that you aren't running Bennett, because Bennett's attack buff is wasted on Mualani. She's an HP scaler, and so your Xiangling as a solo off-field pyro is going to need a ton of ER, like oftentimes upwards of 250. This can make playing her very difficult and a bit inconsistent at times. However, she's definitely still an amazing option if you can pilot her well and have enough energy recharge. Keep in mind though that in these teams I can recommend Favonius weapons, and also because Xiangling applies the most off-field pyro, you can even run more flexible teams like another hydro such as Farina, but more on that later. For your other pyro options, I think Dea is also surprisingly strong, with Mualani in particular. This is a sentence I didn't think I'd ever say, but Dea actually can work decently well. Like, yes, she has her downsides, her field uptime isn't amazing, but you can use a sack greatsword to help with shorter rotations, or even if you have her C2, then you don't have to worry about any uptime issues. Her skill has a solid AoE and applies pyro enough for Mualani, because again, it's not the fastest pyro, but it's enough. And you can also run a supportive artifact set on her to help buff your team, making her a decent off-field pyro option. She gives you some defensive utility as well, but keep in mind that Dea's personal damage, since you're just using her skill, will be effectively non-existent. So obviously damage-wise, Xiangling can help more, but getting the ER isn't that easy, with Dea being a solid comfy pick that you can use for some pyro inside of her field. Additionally, with pyro appliers, you can also also run Burning to help keep the Pyro aura on enemies, running a Dendro support alongside your Pyro. Now for the other Pyro options, you can run Toma or Xinyan, but both of these can have their problems. They're mostly fine in single target, but don't have great AoE and don't have the fastest Pyro application. Their shields are nice though, and you can run them with a grouper and an emo support to help you get either Pyro infusion, constantly being swirled, or just grouping enemies to help with your Pyro application. Now outside of your Pyro options, you're typically running just flex slots most of the time. Personally, I like running Burning with Vaporize, a burn vape team, where you're running a Dendro character, a Pyro character, and then a flexible last slot, with there being a ton of options. Now as far as Dendro characters go, Emily and Nahida are the two best ones, but you can use pretty much any Dendro character who fits your rotation. Emily works really well because while she doesn't give you any buffs to your team, she just has a ton of personal damage, making her a really solid sub DPS if you are triggering Burning, which you will be doing, assuming you have a Pyro character on your team. Emily's personal damage is great, and she has solid AoE as well. Nahida, on the other hand, also has okay damage and great Dendro application, but especially will also give you huge buffs, like notably a ton of elemental mastery through her burst for your Mualani, who will be forward vaporizing, so EM is actually a very useful stat. For other flex slots, Anemo characters such as Kazuha or Sucrose for grouping and buffs both work very well, running the Verdescent Venerer set and giving you either elemental damage bonus through Kazuha or elemental mastery through Sucrose. For other flex slots, some Geo characters are actually solid options. You can run Zhongli as a shielder and resistance shredder on a supportive set and just being a solid unit. You can give him either Deepwood for a Dendro buff, Hero for a small elemental damage buff, or even Archaic Petra, or really just anything, and is a solid and comfy support character. Shiori can work, especially in a double Geo team for just off-field damage, and Kachina, while she doesn't have any particular synergy with Mualani herself, what she does is effectively just be a Natlan character who can run the hero set, which on the 4-piece gives you a ton of elemental damage bonus, 40% just by being a Natlan character. Now, while I covered this earlier and in my last video, so I don't want to reiterate it, this 40% elemental damage bonus is genuinely really huge, to where any future Natlan character that comes out who can synergize with Mualani and is a support can run this set and get even more synergy just through this 4-piece. Additionally, as mentioned, even just this 12% elemental damage bonus can make it enough to run on other supports who aren't from Natlan if you don't have a better set, but it's nothing game breaking. Kachina can therefore be a viable and really low investment option because you're just using her for the artifact set and maybe a little bit of personal damage, but again, her synergy just comes from the fact that she's one of the only Natlan characters we have, in fact the only one outside of Mualani at the time of recording. Lastly, for other flex slots, you can run even Hydro characters like Candace for some damage bonus, and keep in mind that Candace can actually be better in these teams without her C6, as if you don't have the fastest off-field Pyro application, her C6 can maybe apply a bit too much Hydro and ruin some of your vaporizes, but if you have faster Pyro, then it shouldn't be an issue. Mona can also work for just a bit of a bigger number, and Farina can give you a huge amount of damage bonus and really good personal damage, but again, she applies quite a bit of Hydro, so she only really works with a really fast off-field Pyro, with the only current option being Xiangling. Now, to go over some example teams, here's what you need to know. Firstly, as mentioned, Mualani will be played in Vaporize, so run her with a Pyro support and maybe a Dendro one as well. You can either run straight Vaporize or Burning plus Vaporize, a burn vape team, which I personally enjoy more, and it helps you get a bit more consistent Pyro application, while also allowing you to run a strong Dendro option, especially if you have Nahida or Emily. Your last slot will be incredibly flexible, and in fact, every slot here is flexible with the characters I mentioned earlier, provided you are triggering Vaporize on your Mualani's Shark Bites. Any of the teams that I'm showing here, again, being very flexible, all can work quite fine. You can run a double Geo team, you can run a Burning team, you can run Kachina just for the set, or any other flex slot, and as mentioned, you can even run Farina with Xiangling. However, you have to make sure that 1, you have enough energy recharge, and 2, you can apply enough Pyro to still allow your Mualani to vape, making sure your Hydro doesn't overtake your Pyro aura, so try to make sure Pyro is on the enemies at all times. And also worth noting that with Farina, oftentimes you don't have the best healer option for Mualani, but a Dendro or an Emo one can work, and obviously Farina can stack much faster in this team with her first 2 constellations, but obviously they're not needed. Now, with all that said, I believe 2 truths exist. First of all, since Mualani doesn't have perfect synergies, pretty much any character that just gives her some buff or some elemental application can work in her teams, make your teams very accessible, flexible, and also free-to-play friendly in the sense that there's at least a few good 4-star characters that work with her to where you can kind of do whatever. With also just generic good characters working the best, any support like Kazuha, Zhongli, Xiangling, Nahida, Emily, characters who are already really good can naturally just fit into a team where they make sense if the existing character doesn't have any perfect synergies. Now, on the other hand, it is very clear that future characters, future Natlan characters, the Pyro Archon, and probably others may have a much better synergy with Mualani, where she not only will become a stronger unit, but will also outshine her older teams. So keep in mind that as of right now, she is a a solid DPS and her teams make her feel good, but naturally these teams will evolve as future Natlan characters are released. Lastly, if you're wondering about other reactions, you can run Mualani in basically any Hydra team. She's a solid Hydra unit, so she'll just work, but because she doesn't really attack that fast, and also her kit is entirely designed around big hits that you can vape, her signature even just buffs you when you vaporize, she's definitely designed towards that reaction, and so I recommend her in a vape team to actually make her shine. But if you want to play her in mono Hydro or with other Hydro teams / reactions, then she can work as just your generic Hydro DPS, but it won't be anything game breaking. All right, now with that said, let's get into a showcase of my Mualani in the current floor 12 of the Spiral Abyss. Now, this is going to be on my live NA server, that's why my character levels have changed, and what you'll notice is that because this character is new and Natlan just came out, I don't have the new set fully farmed yet. I've tried. My substats are not great, so I'm running 2-piece with pretty good substats of sets that I've already farmed, and you'll see that my Mualani will be doing pretty impressive damage, despite the fact that she'll be doing much more when she gets her signature set. Additionally, I'm on the Tome of Eternal Flow. I took my Nevelet's weapon, which performs only slightly better than the free-to-play option, and I have a pretty solid ratio of 86-53, obviously being inflated by my crit stat and my crit ascension. My HP is pretty decent. I have 75 EM, but more through my EM buffs from the Hida, and I'm also running level 9-8 talents and a Constellation 0 Mualani. Now, also interestingly enough, I'm going to be using, at least in some of the clips that I showcase, two free-to-play 4-star characters, Xiangling, who's Xiangling, and Kachina, who's level 1. Now, the reason why I'm running a level 1 Kachina with a level 1 weapon is because of how broken this Scroll of the Hero City artifact set really is. Getting 40% elemental damage bonus for my Mualani and also my Xiangling is really nice and makes any Natlan character usable here, so I'm on a level 1 Kachina, and as you'll see, I did still clear really well because my Mualani is the one doing all the damage with my buffs. Would I prefer to use a Zhongli here? Probably, but this is funnier, so we'll go with that. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the guide, and I hope you'll enjoy the showcase. Let's go. Ooh, 869K. And so yeah, that's about it. Now, I would like to start by apologizing for my change of mic like 8 times throughout this video. I've been everywhere. But as far as Mualani goes, I do really like her as a character. I think she's fun and hits like a truck, so very satisfying to play in that regard. It did take some getting used to as far as like hitting my shark attacks goes. Some enemies can be more annoying to fight, like the PMA in the Abyss that can like fly away from your shark hits or have some weird interactions with it. But for the most part, she's very fun, has a unique playstyle, and I think she's quite strong and will only get better better as future teammates come out, because as I said, right now her team synergy is kind of lacking. Like, she has strong teams, but none that really synergize perfectly with her. So I think future Natlan supports will fill the slots of her teams in future patches. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the guide. As always, if there's anything you want to add, it will be in a pinned comment. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.